Following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Usually we have our, little intro video or whatever you want to call it. But we're not really talking NFL today. We're talking college football, and we're gonna have some fun with it. So once again, welcome to the Backup Podcast. I'm Nate. Usually I'm joined with my co-host Brian as well, but he's not here today. Instead, we have a special guest. He's the host or co-host of the Sound Endzone Podcast, one of, or if not the most knowledgeable person at Belly Up Sports about college football. And we had him on last time when we had the old name and everything, but technology sucks, and that file got corrupted, so I couldn't post anything. But he's back here to talk some college ball. It's Eric Mulhair. And first off, Eric, welcome to the show again, and happy Tuesday to you. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. Hopefully this goes better than last time. We actually, get it out to the masses. But no, other than that, I'm fine.
Alrighty. Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. And I'm excited to talk some college ball. And look, I know the first thing to do would be to dive into the college football playoff and all that stuff, which you will. I'm sure you were one of the people that were disappointed that Florida State wasn't in the top four teams, or
yes and no.
Okay.
My issue, I guess, was with how the committee sort of went against everything they've done, right, for the entirety of the college football playoff as far as how they voted. It was really just very inconsistent, and it was even inconsistent how they ranked Florida State, like in those last 3 weeks of the season. Their reasoning didn't, in my mind, really hold up with what they had just done the previous 2 weeks as far as moving them up and down. So I was very surprised just because it went against sort of their established track record of how they would treat an unbeaten Power 5 champ. But, we still, at the end of the day, ended up with what I think is a very good playoff field. We should have two really good semifinal games. And, we've got four possible championship matchups that I think are all for, in different ways, very compelling. So the end product, I think, will still be very, very good in terms of the playoff, but the whole thing, my issue really wasn't what the final result was. It was how we arrived there, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I gotcha. As we all know, the top four teams, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama, Georgia and Florida State looking on the outside, or on the outside looking in, I should say. And we'll dive into all that in a bit. But of course, I know we spoke about this on our first episode together, and that was the University of Colorado, Deion Sanders, all the hype about Shedeur Sanders, all that stuff. And when we spoke, they just beat TCU. They would win the next two games against I think it was Rutgers, right? I think they beat.
No, they beat. Was it the TCU game or the Nebraska game?
They beat TCU and then Nebraska.
Yeah.
And then they beat Colorado State.
And then they beat Colorado State. And then after that, I know they beat Arizona State. I know that wasn't, kind of right in a row there. That was sort of mixed in with all their other games. I think right after Colorado State, I think they played Oregon and just got demolished.
Then that was a game that, I expected to say, okay, this is where Colorado could make a statement against, a really big school like Oregon and just, somehow shocked the world. They lost to Oregon, like you just mentioned. They lost to USC, and the lose streak would continue after the Arizona State game. They just kept losing and losing and losing, and all the hype about them just died down. I guess the question I want to ask is, after a 3-0 start, what happened? Because it's just like they had Deion, they had a pretty solid quarterback, but is it as simple as they just couldn't block for their quarterback?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I think what worked for them, particularly in the TCU game, right? Coming into the TCU game, they're a complete unknown. Like, you can look at their roster, okay, well, they got this guy, but they don't know how the quarterback is going to transition from FCS to a Power 5 league. They don't know if Travis Hunter is going to be able to play both ways and be effective. They don't, there's just a lot of unknown, and I think they caught some people off guard. Is part of it. Part of it is at TCU and Nebraska, just both, in Colorado State for that matter, they ended up just not being very good. I think TCU and Nebraska both finished 5-7. I mean, they weren't People looked at TCU like, oh, well, they were in the championship game last year. 2022 TCU was in the championship game. 2023 TCU had a lot of question marks as well, right? They had a lot of new guys. So I think once the book got out on them, as far as here's what they do well, here's what they don't, and if you're terrible up front on both sides of the ball, you're going to have a pretty clear, defined ceiling of how successful you can be. And they weren't very good. They were, even in the games they won, they beat Nebraska by 3 scores. Well, they still gave up like 9 tackles for loss and 6 sacks or some ungodly number. It's how do you win a game with that kind of offensive line play is a little bit of a mystery. Well, you're relying on the other team turning the ball over a ton like they did in those first 2 games. But yeah, I think once teams realized, hey, we can beat them up front, they can't run the ball, they struggle to protect the quarterback. And defensively, they just weren't, even the games they won, defensively, they weren't very good. So they ended up kind of where a lot of people, kind of thought they would. I didn't think they'd win 4 games. I thought 3 was kind of their limit. But, you go from the high, right, of the hype train down to where they finish, and it seems like a very disappointing season because of the start they got off to. But it's a big improvement from last year. It's kind of right in line to where they had been for the decade prior. They've averaged about 4 wins a season, and they were kind of right where a lot of people expected them to be. They just got there in an unconventional way, which is why it seems weird.
Yeah, and I was looking back at your overreaction, or revisiting your week 1 overreaction article on bellyupsports.com, and you brought up a great point about the defense just allowing a lot of yards, whether it's rushing or passing or just total yardage in general. I'm seeing their national ranking at the time of the writing of the article. They were 114th, 124th, 126th, 125th points allowed at the time. It was 36.2, and it's just when your offense just can't block, they're going to be off the field, pretty fast. The defense has to come in, and the defense wasn't that good either, all things considered. So it was just a mess.
The defense wasn't good at really any point in a game, and I don't have them in front of me. I remember looking at towards the end of the season, looking at first half, second half breakdown of like yards per play, yards allowed, points allowed, yards per pass, and they were noticeably worse in the second half of games, probably because the offense wasn't rolling. Like depth, for instance, depth was a big question mark for them coming into the seasons. Yeah, you brought in all these guys, but do you have 5 linebackers who can play? Do you have 7 guys on the defensive front that you can rotate in and out? And they really didn't in some spots, and it showed.
I got you. And, they did add some reinforcements via recruitment or transfers for their offensive line.
Yep.
And I think here's the thing, like you just mentioned, they're going from the Pac-12 to, I believe, is the
the Big 12, yeah.
Big 12. Yep. You think they're going to be okay? Because, with the season they had, it's just, in my opinion, I just feel like they're not going to be able to succeed right away, even with all the talent they acquired.
I think they'll address some of the roster shortfalls they have, particularly up front. I don't know that they can fix it to the point where they'll be like, well above average. They pulled in some offensive linemen out of the portal. They got a guy from UTEP. They got a guy from UConn. They got like a 4-star high school kid, and all that's great. It's probably better than what they have, but is a guy from UConn and a guy from UTEP going to turn your offensive line around? Probably not.
Definitely not.
I think you need to have some reasonable expectations. So I think they can be a little bit better. They're going into a conference that play style is, I would say, similar in most cases to the Pac-12. So I think it'll be more of the same for them. It's not like you're going to the Big Ten where it's a little more physical, run game based, beat you up, gritty, and less, I don't want to say finesse because there's sort of the negative connotation with that. But I think 6-6 and get to a bowl game is a perfectly reasonable goal for Colorado. I don't know that I would expect much more than that.
It's better than nothing. If they do make the bowl game next season, it's better than what they were this year. So I mean, I personally was a bit of a bandwagon when they did start 2-0 to start this season, and they just fell off. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people started to not pay attention to them anymore.
Right.
But regardless, they did have more than one win, which was more than they had the year before. So we'll take that and we'll go from there. So we'll see what the Buffaloes do. A team that one more overreaction that you talked about, or in your article as well, which is interesting, was Georgia when they played UC Martin to start the season, and you talked about how they may have been vulnerable, which made a lot of sense. And look, they improved week after week after week after week, as you know, and they had a good season. They really did.
Sure.
They went undefeated, and they met Alabama in the SEC championship when they unfortunately lost by one possession. Your thoughts on Georgia and how I think Carson Beck is coming back for next season. Your thoughts on Georgia this year, being on the outside looking in?
It's just an odd year. I think, last year they would have gotten in. The year before they would have gotten in, right, with the type of season they had. I think with, you start talking about transfer portal and NIL, maybe kind of evening out some of the talent level across other teams as opposed to the same 3 or 4, just kind of start stockpiling it every year. They happen to not win their conference in a year where you've got 3 undefeated conference champs and a 1-loss conference champ and another 1-loss conference champ to beat you. That was another kind of gripe I had with the committee was, the debate that's been around forever, right? The entirety of the college football playoff era has been, is it the 4 best or the 4 most deserving? And it's a weird line to draw because it's sort of subjective. And most years, right up until now, it's been the same 4 teams or 3 teams kind of at the top of that heap anyway, right? By either definition. Because I don't think you can watch all these teams, right? Washington and Texas and Georgia, Florida State and Michigan. I don't think you can watch all these teams every week throughout the whole year and come away thinking there's 4 teams in the country better than Georgia.
Yeah.
But because of sort of how it shook out and when they lost, like if they had lost to at Tennessee, right, towards the end of the year, come back and beat Alabama, they'd still be 12-1. And yeah, they would be conference champs, but they'd be probably the 1 or 2 seed. And here now they're, kind of when you lose does matter, but they'll be fine. They're going to end up, I think, probably with the number 1 recruiting class. They're going to pull 3 or 4 impact guys out of the transfer portal. They'll have a lot of talent coming back. They'll be, another preseason favorite. The machine will keep rolling on. They're fine. Don't worry about Georgia.
Sounds good to me. And here's the thing, because for me, I kind of had a goal for myself this season was to watch more college football than the year before, and I did. Still not as knowledgeable as I should be, but that's something to carry on to next season, hopefully. But here's the thing. So I know Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia was number 1. Yep. But they did lose by 1 possession. It's just why do they drop so far? I guess I should say, because it was just 1 loss. It was 2 an Alabama team in the SEC championship. Why fall from 1 to 5 when, in my opinion, they should be at least 4? And I don't know, maybe Texas gets out or is the odd man out?
So I think that kind of goes back to the logjam you have of like really high end teams.
Okay.
It's tough to look at a 1-loss team, no matter how good they are, that did not win their conference and be like, well, they got to get in over these unbeaten conference champions and these 2 1-loss conference champions, one of whom beat them. It's just kind of the wrong year to, be 12-1 with your 1 loss being in the conference championship game. Okay. I mean, the same thing happened to them 2 years ago. They went 12-0. They just steamrolled everyone in the regular season. Lost to Alabama in the conference championship game. All that did was drop them from 1 to, I think, 3. Right? Because you had a 3-loss Pac-12 champ. You had a 2-loss Big 12 champ, a 2-loss or a 3-loss ACC champ. to the point where you're getting in a group of 5 school in the playoff. It's just that wasn't the case this year. You had 13-0 Washington, 13-0 Michigan. I think dropping them all the way down to 6th was weird, but at the end of the day, I think they're matched up with Florida State in the Orange Bowl, regardless of who's 5 and who's 6. And I think the optics of dropping a team from 4 to 6 ahead of 3 now 1-loss teams, or behind 3 1-loss teams, I think they had their hands full enough justifying dropping Florida State at all, let alone behind that many other teams with 1 loss. So they just sort of took the easy way out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got you. I mean, now I just feel like all this argument, all this debate about, this team should be in over this team in the 14 playoff picture, it's not going to – that excitement, I guess is the right way to say it, isn't going to be there anymore next year because we'd go to a 12-team playoff. So it's just like, big whoop, Georgia lost the SEC, in the SEC championship. No worries, they're still going to be in the playoff.
They would. I mean, they would still have a home game in which they'd be favored. They'd be playing, somebody like Penn State or someone, which the 12-team playoff is going to give us a lot of really good games.
Yeah.
It'll be on-campus games. On-campus games, some really high-profile matchups, right? You're going to get, Oklahoma versus Ole Miss, or an Oregon versus Ohio State. Those types of matchups. You will have fewer players opting out of big bowl games, which personally, as a fan, right, I'm all about. I get why guys do it. I understand. I don't hold it against them, but I would still like to see a New Year's Six, right, the Peach Bowl. Right, or the Fiesta Bowl, where everyone's playing, right? See these actual teams at full strength, not they got 7 starters playing and 6 on defense or whatever. So, and I don't think the race for, or the controversy over who's number 12 and who's number 13 will be quite the same as 4, 5, 6.
Definitely. I mean, look, if we were in a 12-team playoff this year, the Florida State Georgia game would actually mean something. But, other than dignity and I guess a bowl trophy or an orange or a bowl of oranges, I don't know.
Yeah.
That game means pretty much nothing. So, heck of a season by Georgia, lost to Alabama. So we'll just move on from that. 2 more things I want to discuss. One being the playoff picture. I want to get your predictions on that as well. But we talk NFL mostly on this podcast, and I'm a Giants fan. Please ignore the hat. I'm a Phillies fan baseball-wise. I'm a Giants fan football-wise, and that makes no sense to anyone, which is fine. That's how I grew up, and I do apologize for that. And
Philadelphia isn't that like right across the river from Jersey?
Yeah, that's
all.
And that's the thing. So, it doesn't make sense to anyone. But
it's not that outlandish. I mean, I'm a Houston Astros and Minnesota Vikings fan. I mean, figure that one out. So I'm not going to give you too much grief.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, look, the Giants, my Giants, about the Tommy DeVito story and everything, and it's great. But let's talk realistically. My guys need a quarterback. Yes, I love it. I love the celebration. I love the Asians. I love the family. All the story around him.
Yeah. It's a fun story. I just don't know that I don't think the Giants even view him as like the long-term answer.
They just love him for this year. But once the offseason starts, I feel like his job, we all know his job is pretty much done. Like, he'll be the backup at best, if not third string. So it's clear the Giants need a quarterback. And all season long, all I've seen is, Caleb Boyd, we got a tank for Caleb. We got a tank for Drake May. Oh, look, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. Let's go get him at maybe 5 or 6, depending where we're at. Maybe Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix if he's there in the late first, second round. All these college quarterbacks we talk about. And part of me thinks, especially for Williams and May specifically, why should I be okay with feeling like getting one of either of those guys isn't the best idea? Because Caleb Williams, especially as dynamic and athletic of a player he is, I just feel like he's a bit overrated. Same thing for Drake May too, because they can't. It seems like they can't win big games at the college level, and if they come to New York specifically, they're gonna get eaten alive if
Right.
they don't get off to a fast start. So, should I be okay with feeling that way, or am I just completely wrong out of the water?
I don't know. I don't get too wrapped around the axle on kind of figuring out which college quarterbacks are or are not going to do well, because so much of it depends on situation. And you could have quarterback A, quarterback B. A is viewed right across the board as better than quarterback B, but he happens to go somewhere. I mean, I think the fit matters so much. You could look at a guy like Tua Tagovailoa.
Mhm.
Didn't look like anything special his first 2 years because he didn't have playmakers around him. They weren't very good up front. He had a coach who actively disliked him. And now you fast forward another couple of years, and he's in a system that fits what he does well better. He's got guys like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill around him. They have a strong running game, good rapport with the coach. I think if you're just like any job, right? If you're happy when you go to work, you're going to be better at that job than if you're just kind of going because you have to. So there's a lot of liked about all these guys, right? Caleb Williams and Drake May particularly, whether it's accuracy, ball placement, arm strength, mobility, what have you. And I try not to do it too much because I figure, NFL teams are awful at judging which quarterbacks are going to be good and which ones aren't. All right. The league is littered with top 10 picks who didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And maybe the best one of all time was like a 6th rounder. So, I don't claim to know as much as they do, and they don't seem to know a whole lot. So guys like, I think Jaden Daniel is a guy who, given the right fit, could be really, really good, depending on where he went, who he's matched up with, who he's got around him. But that holds true to a lesser extent for everyone. But I think his ceiling is very, very high because I think his ceiling is like Lamar. But sort of his floor, right? If he goes to a team that doesn't have playmakers, doesn't have good protection, doesn't have a coach who can design kind of the offense or call the offense around what he does well, right? Then you're looking at a guy like Baker Mayfield, where
that's
sort of bounces around and is adequate. But you look back and be like, man, should I really have, spent a top 15 or a top 10 pick on him, right? Did I get what I wanted out of that pick?
Yeah, and that's the thing about tanking too. To add on to what you said, from my standpoint, at first I was okay with us losing, but at the same time I was like, this kind of sucks, And the Giants had won a 3-game winning streak, and before they lost recently on Sunday to New Orleans, and I was like, okay, back to losing now. This is when we are like sort of back in the draft picture. But if we did tank and have that let's say if the season ended today, right? The Giants would have like the 5th overall pick. But let's say we did lose some of those games, and now we'd be like the 2nd overall pick in the draft. I just don't know. Like all this hype about May and Caleb, I just feel like it's just too much. And I would feel better if you answered this question, and it might help me feel better about who I should be looking at more. Who is your favorite prospect out of the, let's say, 5 quarterbacks, like a Williams and a May and a Penix and a Bo Nix and a Jaden Daniels? Is there a favorite you have by any chance out of the 5?
Probably Caleb Williams, because I've watched him for 3 seasons just sort of do whatever he wanted on the football field. Mm-hmm. Even coming in partway through the season as a true freshman at Oklahoma, he just always seems to go to the right place with the ball. And he can make all the throws. He can move around. He's not particularly big. I think he's, 6 foot 210. He's not, but Russell Wilson and Drew Brees weren't like gargantuan either. They were smaller guys. They did fine. So I think probably Caleb Williams, but the more I watch the season, the more I think maybe I would rather have Jaden Daniels over Drake May. If you can get that guy lined up with a couple decent receivers and give him time, I think he showed sort of what he can do, right?
Look, I mean, so now I feel better that if we don't get Caleb, Jaden Daniels would not be a bad choice either. But you mentioned the receivers and the offensive line.
Yeah.
Ironically, that's two positions the Giants don't have solved. So, yeah, we're going to have to figure things out.
Yeah, I mean, if it were me, I would almost, depending on how high I was picking, I would almost trade out of it and trade back and start accumulating some offensive linemen, because it really doesn't, you can pick a quarterback first overall.
Yes.
If he's going to spend half the season on his back, it doesn't matter how good he is. Like, we're sort of seeing that in Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Like Bryce Young, I promise you, he is better than he's able to show right now, right? Because everything around him is a giant tire fire. So, he's sort of got no shot. Whereas you look at CJ Stroud, who was picked second, a little bit better up front. They're playing at probably, maybe in a weaker division. But he's got better players around him. A better maybe offensive scheme, less churn because you don't have a coaching staff that could be fired at any moment like you do in Carolina, right? Because the owner is a little impatient, itchy trigger finger. So I think CJ Stroud just landed in a better situation, and that's why you're seeing better results.
Yeah, and then I guess I forgot to mention this comment here by Kevin Wilson from Belly Up. How does Michigan get rewarded the number one ranking with the terrible schedule they had? So this is something obviously for you, being the expert in this. How would you respond to this one?
I wish I had a good answer for him, because it's a question I have as well. They didn't play anyone with the pulse for 9 games. Okay. Like, I think through week 9, I think their best win was like UNLV or Rutgers. So, you beat Penn State, great. You beat Ohio State, awesome. My thing with Michigan is, because if I was on the committee, my vote probably would have been Washington, because they beat better teams. Mm-hmm. And they beat more than just 2 good teams. And even Washington has some warts, right? They went through a stretch sort of in the second half of the season where they didn't play very well. I don't know. Between the schedule and the fact that, your coach missed half the season because you were cheating, seems weird. We'll get to it in a couple minutes. I suspect it end up not mattering where they're ranked once the games start. But I don't, offensively, they don't scare you. Their defense is very, very good, but then it comes back to, I don't know how good that defense was or wasn't based on the sign stealing stuff. If you look, like, draw a line in the sand, right, from when this all came out and they put the guy on leave and they ended up firing their linebackers coach and started investigating. Well, from that point forward, you look and you're like, okay, well, they gave up a season high in points, like 4 straight games, like every week, a little more. But that's when they actually played the good teams and not just teams that were on their schedule. I think Hawaii was last year. Who else? UNLV, Rutgers, Nebraska. I think they played Minnesota maybe. They just didn't play any very good teams in the first half of the year, so it stands to reason they wouldn't give up a ton of points. So I think that's maybe somewhat coincidence, but maybe there's some smoke there. The short answer is I don't know. I wouldn't have voted them number 1, but nobody asked me.
If you're part of the committee, then that would have been the case. I mean, I did like Washington. I feel like they should have been number 1 too. I feel like over Michigan, but hey, it is what it is. And Michigan's reward for being undefeated was facing Iowa in the Big Ten championship, and we know how that went.
Yeah.
Boy.
God, the Big Ten West. Don't get me started on the Big Ten.
Oh boy.
I'm glad divisions are going away.
Oh man. And look, regardless, one of my good friends, he's an Ohio State fan, so seeing his team fall to Michigan was he wasn't a happy guy, I tell you. He was very excited in the morning, and then we didn't hear from him after the game. So, as we all know, it's Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. Michigan will take on Alabama, whereas Washington will take on Texas. My last one to you, I guess. I may have some quick questions at the end, but okay. The main thing is, who do you got? First off, Michigan and Alabama.
Oh, the Rose Bowl. Michigan's a slight favorite, but I think I would lean Alabama. I just talked about Michigan's offense. I think the only way I see them winning is if they can go out and run the ball for like 225 yards. I don't see a way for them to move the ball down the field throwing it. Alabama has two of probably the best 5 corners in college football. With Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. They got a freshman back there, Caleb Downs, who's been a fantastic player for them at safety. In Michigan, they don't scare you, like you're not frightened about the passing game when you're going to go play them. So Michigan's going to have to run the ball. They're going to have to control the clock, and they're going to have to be effective doing it. It's possible they can. Michigan's very good up front. If you were going to look at one weakness for Alabama, it's not even really a weakness. It's just more of a relative to what everything else they do is their front 7 in the run game has had some poor games at times. But, leaving aside even the coverage, right, then you're talking about bringing in like Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell rushing the passer. That is going to be tough to deal with for Michigan. So I think they're going to really have to lean on getting a push up front and moving the ball on the ground. So what I will be interested to see is if Alabama is able to hit any deep shots on Michigan's defense. They've sort of become a deep ball offense, right? Run, play action, right? Take a whole shot. So I don't expect a particularly high scoring game. I think it'll be defense driven. But if I was going to make a bet, I probably would take Alabama money line. Okay. If it's less than a field goal, like it is.
All right. Well, yeah, I like Bama too. I mean, I've always been a fan of Nick Saban. Jalen Milroe has turned things around after his benching. Took it like I guess professional, as you could call it, and ever since then has led Bama this far. So. Yeah, I like Alabama, to be honest. I don't know. I'll be rooting for them for sure.
Yeah, and I think, Alabama kind of comes and goes as he does. If he can break off a couple of long runs, particularly, on scrambles versus like designed QB runs, that's going to go a long way. And really it's avoiding turnovers and just take what's there. A lot of TV guys will call it free grass. Right? Okay, well, if they're going to give you 6 yards, just take 6 yards, go to the next play. Don't get too greedy, and that's sort of when you make mistakes. But if they can do some stuff, getting him right, moving pocket or rolling him out, bootleg, and give him that option where, hey, if it's not there, just take off. Right? He's the best athlete on the field. Like anytime he's playing, he's the straight up best athlete on the field. Right? Let him go win you the game.
All righty, we'll take it. And then Washington and Texas, Michael Penix versus Quinn Ewers, the quarterback matchup. Jonathan Brooks, I believe, for Texas. The running back is not pulled. ACL, nope. Right? ACL? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was making sure. I was like, wait a minute. Is he the one with the ACL injury? Who do you got? I got Washington. I'll be rooting for them.
I would like to see Washington win. I just don't see them beating Texas. I think Texas is just a little bit better up front. I don't think Washington's going to be able to run the ball at all. Mm-hmm. I do expect a lot more points than in the Rose Bowl game because neither of these defenses are particularly great against the pass, and they both throw the ball well. So, yeah, it'll probably come down to turnovers, but if Washington can go out there and pick off 2 passes, then sure, yeah, I like their chances. But I don't think either team's going to be able to run the ball all that well. It's going to probably come down to who can make plays in the passing game, and I would give a slight edge to Texas. But I think that one will be close and has all the makings of kind of a, who's got the ball last type of shootout.
All right. Well, with that being said, that means you have Texas and Alabama at the rematch. We know how the first one went. Is it the same result, or does Alabama figure it out?
Probably not. I've watched Alabama throughout the year. They're a much better team than they were in week 2. That's just the long and short of it. They've particularly the offensive line, right? The offensive line that took the field week 2 in Tuscaloosa and sort of got bullied around and run over. They're not playing like that line anymore. I mean, they beat the snot out of Georgia up front in the SEC championship game. And, Texas in the USF game right after, it was a very, very ugly win in bad weather on the road. That's the game Milroe did not play in.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of, I don't know, the wake-up call maybe, it felt like. From there, you can look through every game and just like better.
Yeah.
So I would lean Alabama, because defensively their strength, right, which is that pass defense, sort of lines up with what Texas really does well, moving the ball down the field through the air. And I think it's going to be pretty tough sledding when you're talking about going against a secondary, right, and facing that pass rush. So I would probably take Alabama.
All right. So all of this talk about who should be in, who should be out, all this just for you to say Alabama wins the whole thing, which is something we're kind of used to seeing.
Yeah. No chance I regret any of those picks in a month, right?
No. We'll have to see. Maybe we'll have you on once the season ends and talk about your, to see if for me, I hope you're right, because I am rooting for Alabama to win the whole thing. So look, we're in the same boat. So we'll just we'll leave it at that. Before you go, a couple more quick ones for you. Which team impressed you the most this season, or surprised you the most, maybe?
Boy, I don't know if I can narrow it down to just one. But I can give you like a pool of 4 or 5, 6 teams. Arizona.
Yep.
They had a win total from Vegas of like 4.5 was their over under. And even the games they lost, I think they lost to Washington by a touchdown. They lost 2 games in overtime. They end up 9-3. They were very, as the season went on, they got better. They had a great year. Northwestern had, all this drama with firing the coach over the hazing stuff over the summer, and they take the defensive coordinator who they had just hired from North Dakota State and make him the interim, and they go out and win 7 games after going 1-11 last year. Very, very surprising. Missouri, I finished 10-2. I thought they would be sort of an average. Hey, try to go win 7 games in the SEC East. But who else? Missouri. I didn't think Oklahoma State was going to be. I thought they were maybe in trouble coming into the year. They had a lot of roster turnover. Come out in the first 3 weeks, they just get steamrolled at home by South Alabama. They lose by, I think, 26 points or 28 points. And they look dead in the water. They go to Iowa State the very next week and lose, and then they roll off like 7 straight wins and find themselves in the Big 12 title game. So where they sort of finished versus, so it's a little on the fence coming into the year, and then they just looked awful the first month. There's no way I would have picked them to play for a conference championship. Who else? Let's see. Louisville. I thought Louisville could maybe get to 8 wins because of their schedule. They missed a lot of the big boys in conference play, like Clemson, Florida State, so on. Mm-hmm. But they end up 10-2. I think those are the big ones. Louisville, Missouri, Oklahoma State, Arizona. I think I'd go with those Northwestern. So someone out of that group of 5 teams.
All right. And what about teams that maybe disappointed you, I guess, or were very underwhelming?
I think I got to go with USC on that one for a preseason top 10. I think they were number 6 or 7 ranking, and to finish 7-5, they lost, I think, 5 out of their last 6. And the way they lost them, I mean, they just got run off the field on defense. They ended the season giving up, I think, 34 or 35 points a game. They were fortunate to be 7-5. They blew a huge halftime lead and ended up beating Colorado by a touchdown. That was, I think, their 4th game or 5th game. But the whole second half of the season, they didn't give up less than 34 points in any game. Then you go out and you're okay, lose to Utah, lose to UCLA, lose to Washington. It's just lose. And for a team that, was won 11 games last year, bringing back the Heisman Trophy winner, and they had addressed the defense. They brought in some pretty good players on defense, right? Barrett Alexander from Georgia, Jack Sullivan from Purdue. They brought in some pretty, what were viewed as pretty quality pieces, particularly on their front 7. And they just couldn't stop a soul. Like, they couldn't tackle. Their run fits were awful. They're constantly out of position. It's almost like, you're watching them play. You're like, boy, do these 2 linebackers, do they practice together? Like, what are they, there's no, it was just ugly to watch. So they have some work to do, especially with how they play defense going into the Big Ten next year. All right, there's a physicality piece defensively that they are missing. They were missing it last year, and they were missing it even more this season. But they better find something, because you're going to find yourself in November, in Champaign, Illinois, when Brett Bielema brings out the 3 tight end heavy package. You got to have something. They don't have it right now, right? They're going to give up the first down on that play. So, yeah, I didn't think they were necessarily going to win the Pac-12. I thought they would be in the discussion. I thought, okay, well, if they don't win the Pac-12, it's going to be because they're not good enough defensively again. But I didn't see 7-5 coming.
Yeah, I was looking at the schedule and everything and the results and whatnot, and my first thought was, oh, maybe Caleb Williams isn't that good after all. But when considering the points that they allowed, the defense allowed, I was like, okay, a few stops here and there, we could be talking about different records. So.
Yeah, and a few is all. I don't know how many games they lost where they scored 40 points, but I know it's not 0.
Yeah,
it's probably not even 1 either. It's I know they scored 40 against Washington and lost by 2 possessions. So I get that. Yeah, that's Washington, but 50 points. Like, come on.
That's kind of it's kind of a lot considering. Yeah.
They would be my pick for most disappointing, I think.
All right, we'll take it. And I guess that's pretty much it. Oh, one more thing. Why can't Army and or Navy throw the football? That's the one game I look forward to that I kind of know more about. And I kid you not, all I see is just runs. Why don't they throw? That's my last one for you, because I don't understand it.
It really centers around, whenever you see someone running a triple option or the wing T type offense like that, it really comes down to, we have to do this because we don't have the type of athletes that the other teams have. So that kind of comes down to who. Sorry, that's my alarm to go pick up my daughter from school.
Okay.
I don't know why I have it on. She's on break for the next 2 weeks. But it comes down to okay, who wants to go to the Naval Academy? Because it's not just I'm going to go there for 3 years, play football, and then go to the NFL, right? That's not that kind of place.
Yeah.
And then it's who can get into West Point or the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy. It's not a very large pool. So they don't get. You look at the type of athletes that not even a place like LSU or Michigan, like a group of 5 school, like Appalachian State.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The type of athletes that Appalachian State can go get versus the type of athletes that the Naval Academy or Army or Air Force can go get are not the same group of people. So, and it's not to say that they don't have good athletes. They just don't have as high-end athletes. Finding a quarterback who wants to go to Navy and then having guys for him to throw to, you're going to be undersized up front. So it's just sort of, it's really by necessity, I guess, is the short answer.
I mean, it's good to know because, like, every time I see one of the two, it's always just a lot of rushing yards, but like less than 100 passing yards, and it's like I never understood why. But now we know. Okay, now I know how things work now with the academies and whatnot. And well, with that, that will do it. And I can say I'm a little more knowledgeable in college football. Hopefully, the next time we meet up, whether it's later after the end of the season officially, or it's next year when the college football season kicks up again, I have a goal in mind to watch more college ball and not, be knowledgeable like you, of course, because you're just an expert in college football and everything. But
experts pushing it, but I do watch a lot of football,
which is a good thing. I mean, I'm so focused on the NFL that, like, when draft season comes, I'm over here like, who's this prospect? But I'm excited to see how this ends with the college football playoff, the 14 playoff to be exact. And as we know, next year it will be a 12-team playoff. Eric, sir, thank you so much for your time. Where can our viewers and listeners find you?
South Endzone Podcast. We're on YouTube. We're actually streaming tonight. We're doing our postseason awards and holiday special show. That is 7 or 7:30 Eastern, but yeah, it'll be on there afterwards. At South Endzone Pod for all the socials, right? Twitter, Instagram. I think we have TikTok. I don't handle that stuff because I'm old. But yeah, any audio only, anywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, whatever. So we're like Dion. We're not hard to find.
We play for clicks.
Yep.
I will be there. I'm excited to see that show. And thank you so much for your time, sir. I appreciate you. And thank you guys for listening and watching to the Backup Podcast. We're back tomorrow. Thank you for watching, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. No, not even Twitter, X or whatever. That's so, I don't know. I never.
I refuse.
Yeah, same. It's still Twitter to me. The fact that I have to pay $11 for a check mark, which I might have to do eventually, but that's not the point. So Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, X, and Instagram as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. We got more NFL talk for you. Until then, thanks for watching.